So we've got Bob here. He's the OSU wheat breeder. Also, Aaron Carter. I saw. Yep, you're here. He's a WSU variety or wheat breeder. And actually, some WSU varieties that were looking pretty good in our variety trials recently. So I'm glad he was able to join. And then if I haven't met anybody here, my name is Ryan Graebner. I head the Serial Extension Program, which focuses on variety testing in the state. Let's see. So I think the big question with varieties at this point is what's not going to get rust, because as the previous conversation indicated, it looks like Magic's races have become very virulent on Magic, and as quickly as we can diversify the varieties and move to newer varieties, I think the better. But that's not trivial, especially for the clear fields. Bob, would you like to mention anything?
Talking about the clear fields, I don't know if it's my computer or your computer, but you were breaking up. But one of the things that I'm advocating, and Christina's already talked about it, is varietal diversification on farmers' fields. We haven't had that opportunity with clear fields, but with the newer second, what I call second wave of clear fields that are coming out, and I include in this the 2X2 CL+, Appleby CL+, Stingray CL+, and Resilience CL+, where the last two are out of Washington State. We have an opportunity to be able to have clear field technology in the field and have more than one variety, so we don't get the 70 to 80% acreage. Where the selection is going to come in other than resistance, and what I look at is fitting in the proper growing window and under the proper rainfall. Where we have differences is in the heading date or when it flowers. One of the reasons Magic, I believe, has been successful is that it was what I say is the earliest of the late group of clear fields. So it could grow fairly well in the drier areas. So what I'm looking at is what should be recommended is 2 varieties for an area, and preferably have those available. So an example would be in Wasco, Sherman area. I would probably recommend Appleby because it's early, and then Stingray. And if I were in more the Pendleton area, I would go with 2X2 and Stingray. Those have fit well across those areas. And right now, Aaron can chime in on this. There's probably, we're either some certified, but I think mostly registered of Appleby will be available this fall. I think a small amount, I don't know, Aaron can chime in on this, Stingray will be available certified this year. I think 2X2 is 2 years out, but you have to get someone to grow the registered seed first, and I don't know where Resilience is. I do know there are other lines, both in my program, I believe in Aaron's, and there's some new UI lines. I think Lima Grain has some new lines, and I'm almost going to guess Syngenta does from the last Washington, the Pacific Northwest Quality Council meeting. So there are lines coming along, but I think we need to get to the point that there's a different style of management with varieties to think about managing stripe rust.
So Aaron,
I was just going to say, Aaron, where are we with where are you guys with the Stingray seed?
Yeah, Stingray should be pretty widely available this year. I mean, again, it it depends on the seed dealer you're working with and whether they put in the order, but yeah, it's definitely been a variety that's been doing well across the region, and yeah, great stripe rust resistance and some other good disease resistance with it. So it should be available around about, like I say, I just specifically, you would have to talk with your seed dealer to see if they have it or not.
This is Ryan. So I definitely agree with Stingray being a strong option in the Pendleton and Walla Walla area. It has done well in the variety trials really throughout the state, even Willamette Valley. Hermiston has done great, but I don't think there's a lot beyond there. But for some of the lower area regions, I'm still a little bit cautious about it, just because it is a later maturing variety. And if you're in a 12 inches or less rainfall area, I'd just be careful planting too much of your acreage to it, because we've had a string of pretty good years so far. But if we get a tough year where we don't get this late season moisture that we're getting now, not saying it will happen, but I'd be a little bit concerned about Stingray having a hard time. But it's got a great stripe rust package and definitely an option. In terms of varieties for next fall, they're really just, in terms of varieties with certified seed availability, and I don't actually know if there's any certified Applebee that'll be available this fall. I think there's only one registered field at this point. That's 50 to 100 acres. But there's a lot of really good non-clear field varieties. And so if you're in a system where you can go to something that's not clear field, Assure, Drive, Roslyn, if you're able to get some seed at LCS Shine or Ghost, I mean, yeah, each individual growers I've encouraged talking to me, or also we are going to have another series after harvest, as soon as we start to get harvest results in, where we can talk more specifically about the newest or most recent or this year's data and what availables or varieties are going to be available for this fall in different regions. But yeah, if you can move to a non-clear field variety, you get to a lot of good options. If you can move to a spring wheat variety, we've talked about that not necessarily being profitable, but it might be a good year to try to also get some grassy weed control out of that.
Ryan.
Also,
yeah.
Nathan Ray wrote in the chat. Could either you or Bob, could you describe some differences or similarities between Stingray and Oregon 2x2, and which is better for recrop situations?
Hey, Mary, could one of those people give us a highlight for 2019, your varieties you had, the disease risk? Can one of you guys pop up at WSU or Oregon State on each one of these varieties as you're talking about them, what they, Sap Stripe, Fusarium, and all the other stuff as you're talking?
I will pull up my sheet that has that. So to Nathan Ray's question first, similarities and differences between Stingray and OR2X2. In the variety trials in Pendleton and Walla Walla area, Stingrays tended to come out a little bit higher up, just in terms of straight yield. What OR2X2 has is great strawberry foot rot resistance. And so if you're in a system where that's a disease that you've really been working with, that's where I'd be looking at OR2X2 having a home. Bob, Aaron, would you like to pitch anything?
So if I were going to compare the two, I think Stingray either heads at a similar time or possibly a day. I think it's a day or two later than 2X2. Both have good stripe rust resistance, or we haven't seen rust on it. Foot rot resistance, Stingray has PCH1. 2X2 has PCH1 and PCH2. I think Stingray is a little shorter. I think it is a little stiffer straw. So when you look at it with the, when you have any type of, is it straw breaker, you have 2X2 will stand. On Fusarium, I don't know about Stingray. I think 2X2 probably falls in moderately susceptible, or I don't know what, Chris could comment on that. Sea-stripe, I honestly can't tell you what it is on that, on either Stingray or 2X2.
So I've got all the results here from the variety trials. So looking at Magic, Stingray, 2X2, and Appleby. For Sea-stripe, Stingray and 2X2 are a little bit better than Magic, and then Appleby is a little bit worse than Magic. For Fusarium, they're all pretty similar, but Stingray is a little bit above, or ahead of the pack, or a little bit better resistance. Strawbreaker, Appleby is about where Magic is, where it's one of the more susceptible clear fields we've got, and then 2X2's great, and Stingray's kind of intermediate. Those are the numbers that I've got.
And this is Aaron. Just for comparison, looking at the OSU data in their trials, Stingray's heading day is about the same as ORCF 101. So that kind of gives you a sense. Most of you are probably familiar with ORCF 101.
And one thing that people should think about also is the possibility of variety blends. And, you know, if you're worried about one variety being a little bit too early versus late, depending upon the year, sometimes that can help you. Last year, Mike Flowers was here. We had a trial out. We were doing some blends on the Clearfield varieties, and there were several blends that actually were substantially higher yielding than Magic alone. So that's another thing to think about. I know some growers have had good luck with blends, and so if you have, that's another thing to think about for diversification.
Can I just mention, I would caution against blending a very resistant one with a very susceptible variety, because then you have a whole lot of stripe rest next to the susceptible, or next to the resistant wheat, which probably it might not be the best for resistance management.
Well, yeah. Plus, if you did that, you might have to spray the whole field, where you wouldn't have had to spray half of it if you grew it in a separate field. But if you got two varieties that are resistant, you know, there could be some advantages to blending them together.
Yeah, and there's a few places where we do have multiple varieties that are similar that look equally nice for a region.
In terms of variety blends, I know we have some seedsmen online, and I'm wondering if we could get some quick estimates as to how many pure stands versus variety blends are being sold in the area. Because it just seems like from high rainfall to low rainfall, folks are having a lot of success with variety blends.
And I should have asked, I don't think that there's anybody from the other wheat breeding programs here, but is that correct? I didn't see any other names from the different programs. Okay.
I guess one comment I would make would be that, you know, if you're a grower and you don't want to see the planes flying as much as they did this year, you know, you need to talk to your seed dealers and, you know, let them know that you're interested in some alternative varieties in the future. It sounds like in terms of Clearfields, there's going to be some limits on seed availability this fall, but you know, certainly the year after, I think we definitely need some alternatives out there.
Without cutting off this discussion, we've got a question from Clint Carlson that I could address now or in the open discussion, whatever you all think would be best.
Oh, I think you should answer it.
Yep.
Okay. So Clint is asking about funding for predictive modeling for rust. And, you know, predictive modeling is something that's extremely complex, but it can allow us to get ahead in terms of timing. And so we're certainly, you know, working with the folks that are in charge of this predictive tool. And it's being headed up, I believe, by Eric DeWolf at KSU. So we've been involved in looking at these models and anything we can do to really get a leg up on understanding, you know, the severity of the rust year that's headed our way. But Chris, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, you know, I have not been as enamored with predictive models as other people have, and you know, the way I kind of approach it is, so much of it depends on whether you've got rust in your field or not. And, you know, to go out and see if it's there, and then if it is there, you see what growth stage you're at, and you see what the 10-day forecast is. And that's, you know, I know that's kind of old-fashioned, but that's kind of the way I've approached it. And a lot of these predictive models out there do not incorporate, you know, the current amount of inoculum in the system. And that's such an important driver that I don't know, just saying that the weather is conducive is necessarily going to give you what you need. The other side of that is that, you know, I think the models are getting better all the time, and also our weather data are getting better all the time, not only in terms of making better predictions for the future, but also being able to take these weather stations and interpolating it down to much smaller areas. So, like Christina said, you know, we're collaborating with this group from Kansas, and we've given them data about Oregon, and they've got some information that we're trying to take a look at. And certainly at, you know, at WSU for decades, they've had their model that's kind of based on macro data for the region in terms of trying to make best guesses about how severe the year potentially could be if the inoculum is there. And that can be really useful just in terms of giving you a heads up on what you might expect.
Yeah, Chris, this is Aaron Esser here at WSU. One of the other things I tell growers, I heard Christine mention, or I think it was Christina mentioned that they were 15,000 acres behind. If I'm a grower and I'm hearing that, I want to get on that list ASAP.
That's right. Yeah.
And then it's a little bit different decision than if you can get a plane in the air tomorrow, then you can kind of keep kicking that can down the road a little bit, make it a day by day. But if you're hearing they're 15,000 acres out, get there.
And that's another reason why we really need to get the highly susceptible varieties out of the system. If you have a highly susceptible variety and you miss your timing, you're screwed. If you have a moderately resistant variety, you've got a little bit more time to play with. So, and again, everybody's just stuck because we had this big change all of a sudden that we weren't expecting. Last year, UI Magic was not falling into the hyper susceptibility category, but unfortunately now it is.
And, you know, with the more rust in the region, the more pressure we're putting on other varieties. So, I mean, this discussion about variety diversification, I think, is so important.
Now, I just had a question, or just an observation. This has been one of the windiest springs and early summers I can ever remember. We've had a lot of 40, 50 mile an hour winds, and we had a session about 3 weeks ago or longer where we had 5 or 6 straight days of east winds. Every day was over 20 miles an hour, sometimes up to 40 miles an hour. And that had a lot to do with the rust dispersion, wasn't it? The extra winds or...
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, once the rust is established in the field, it doesn't matter that much. But in terms of moving it from one infection site, moving it to other fields, I think that could be a big deal. I mean, I've dropped planting envelopes at the Morrow station where it's gone to the next county. So I know how the wind can blow out there.
Yeah, it's been unreal.
Are there any other questions? We can loop back to variety since I know that we didn't cover very much of it, but it is a time to move on to the cropping systems and rotation section. So just letting everybody know, because it's a weird year, we're trying to do a few things to get all the information out to growers. So we have a few sites across the Columbia Basin. Unfortunately, nothing in Umatilla County, though, where we've got large signs by the trials and then small plot signs online. And I'm actually going to share my screen real quick. So make sure it's the right one. Can everybody see this? So this is the variety testing page, and under variety trials, we've got a link that says 2020 self-guided variety tours. And what that shows is just a few locations in Duford, Condon, Morrow, Lexington, and LeGrand, where we've got not all the varieties, but the varieties that we have a little bit of information on. We put small signs in front of those plots so that if you are in the area and if you're interested, then you're able to move through and take a look at the different varieties and just kind of get that better feeling that I think a picture sometimes doesn't do. If you do go to any of these sites, please feel free to call me. I'm more than happy to spend a half hour on the phone talking you through the different varieties, letting me know a little bit in advance just so I'm not on a tractor could be helpful. And then the other side of that is we're going to have another set of Zoom calls after harvest, assuming everything goes fairly smoothly. And that's where we're really going to be going variety by variety for the specific regions and talking about what really might be some of the top varieties. But to let everybody know, I'll be sending an email out through Cereal Central and then also through the program email list. So if you've been getting emails through one of those, then you will get a notice. All right, any other questions before we move on to cropping systems and rotations? Great.